Hey, so I bought this, which is the pattern. That's A. One thing I wanted to show you when you're buying a pattern, and I'll just move this a bit. So I'm going to show you just at the back. It's got all these bits and bobs. One thing to show you is up here. So it's got fabrics, and it tells you what type of fabric works well with this pattern. You've got crepe back satin, don't ask me what that is, sateen, which is like a shiny cotton material, and then ACD, they also say you can use brocade or jacquards. Brocade or jacquards is like really decorative fabric. The other thing it will also say is what other things you need depending on which top. Notions. Notions means things you need as well as the fabric. So you need thread, you need one 7-inch lightweight separating zipper, so you can get them. So you need a 7-inch zipper, and boning of a 1/4 inch wide. They're like, it's kind of like in the diagram, you'll see these lines. They're like probably that thick of a hard, looks like it's like plastic or a bone. That's why they call it boning, and it just gives it that structure. And then 1/8 yard for A and B. Oh yeah, so that's the how much you need of the boning. And then ABD, you need 2 3/8 buttons and 1 4-inch length of elastic cording. So they're all your notions. Then we've got body measurements. Now, because it's a top, I would definitely measure your bust. In here, they're inches. On this side, it's all in French, but if you want to read it in centimetres, the French write it in centimetres. So if you know that that's bust in English, just go to the top in French, and that's your bust in centimetres. So because these will be all your different sizes down here, what your dress size is normal probably won't be the same as this. And I've made that mistake before. So for instance, you'd pick a size 12 because you normally size 12, but then when you make it, it's actually really small. So you actually might need a size 16 or whatever, depending on how you measure. So you see here, size 12, and that gives you the measurements. Now, one thing you can do is measure all your measurements, pick which one you are on each, and then just pick the closest one, and that will be your size. And then we've got top A, purchase same for lining. So this tells you the width of the fabric, and most fabric, and if you go over here, most fabric is 115 centimetres wide. They're like the normal long bolts of fabric that you see at the fabric shop, and that tells you you either need 3/4 yard, but if you go to the French section, it's 0.7 of a metre. So when you go to the cutting counter with your fabric, you go, I'll have 0.7. And then it also says AB interfacing, which is this. So it's 5 meters for $8. This, I've had this for years. It just lasts and lasts and lasts because you don't need a lot of it, and it's very cheap. So it looks like that, and you see there's like tiny little dots on it. They're bits of glue. So you put the glue side down on the fabric and you iron it, and it makes the fabric really stiff. So that's what that'll be for. So that's what it's got here. It's got, that's how much interfacing you need. and I'll go to the French side. It says 1.3 meters of that width, so that's what you need. Then they're for tops B, C, which we're not doing, and D, which we're not doing. And this down here just says how it measures when it's made up. Okay? Cool. So that's just before we've even opened the packet. Okay, so when you open the packet, I'll take it out. There's nothing in there. You've got instruction book, and then these, which is your patterns. Don't worry about that yet. Just put it aside, okay? What you really want to do is unfold all your pattern. Okay, and instead of filming me, I'm just going to put it on the table here so we can talk about it. All right, so here we go. Just to do an adjustment here, and maybe I do this. That's not working very well. Okay, so that's page 1. So you've got your pattern here, then here. So this here is your cutting layouts. When you see that colour on here, it means the pattern is laid out upside down on the fabric. And when you see it white, it's pattern facing up, like that. When it's upside down, it's upside down on the fabric. Cool. And if you see a star, you just have to see the special cutting notes, which will probably be somewhere around there. But, oh yeah, here, special cutting notes. So we don't need them yet. Okay, so depending on your top, and you're picking A, you need pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you cut out one piece of piece 2. So you unravel all this, and you get your pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is if you're using any size width fabric, so that's cool. With nap, that just means if there's a pattern on it. So sometimes you'll see patterns with or without nap. With nap means there's a pattern or there's some type of fabric that's got a special design on it. That's what you'd use. And without nap would just be plain fabric, okay? And that's for all sizes. So that's cool. That's how you would set it out on the piece of material. Now, I'll just explain this, okay? So, fold means you're going to have your fabric. I'll just put it out like this. This is just one I've never used before. So, this is your fold, it's folded. Where am I? This is your folded side, so it's folded, okay? I've got rough edges here when the fabric shop cut it. This edge is your selvage. You'll see there's like, sometimes they have, depending on what type of fabric you've got, they'll have like little colour dots and things. That's from when they actually make the patterned fabric, and that's from the people that design it. So this is called the selvage, and you'll be able to tell a selvage because it usually has these little dots through it. Okay, so that's the selvage. So when you're laying it out and it says fold, selvage, that's the way you will have your fabric, like the picture, and you'll lay your pieces down on it the way it's showing you. Okay, now when you look at that, I'll just put it here. When you're looking at that picture, I'll just fold it in half to make this a bit easier. So when you're looking at that picture, see how they're all white? That means they're going to be side up. So they're going to be with all the writing at the top. If they were grey, you'd flip that pattern upside down. Okay, cool. Now that's that. Then you've got A and B lining. So the same thing, you'll use pieces 1, 3, 4, 5, and that's how you'll have it. And that's how you'll have your fabric with the fold there, your selvage up the top, and then you lay them out like this. Now your lining is, you know, what's inside. Sometimes you get a lined top or whatever. Look at Lou. Anyway, so let's say I was using that patterned one. I'd probably use a plain black lining, and it sometimes can be satin or silky or whatever. So that would be my lining. Same thing, I'd fold it, have the selvage one way, put my pattern pieces on it. So what you would do, and obviously you'd need patterns 1, 3, 4, 5 on the fabric. Cut out your fabric first, then take it all off, unpin it, and then do your lining. Same pieces. Be very careful with the pattern pieces because they can rip. And then at the bottom here we've got interfacing, and we need patterns 1, 3, 4, 5 again. 2B, I don't know what that means. I think there's 2 different types of 2, so we're not using that. And that's how you cut it. Now you see on this one, you've got pattern pieces upside down, and there's a star there, which they mentioned before was a special cutting thing. You can see here as well, there's some hanging over the fold. So I'll just go over and see what that means. So when we go over to the special cutting notes, which was at that top, it says here, okay, if layout shows a piece extending past the fold, cut out all pieces except the piece that extends. Okay, so you're going to cut out everything on there except these 2. Okay, then open out the fabric to the single thickness, so no fold, and cut that piece on the right side of the fabric in position shown in that thing. So that was pretty simple. That's easy. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need. Over here they just show you what each piece is for. So A or 1 is the bodice front, blah 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 blah. Over here is just general directions, and this is what I was explaining about before of where am I? Yeah, of what everything means. So if you see that line, grain line, that just means you have it straight across the fabric when you're laying your pattern piece. You don't have it on an angle, you just have it straight across. This means put the pattern piece on the fold. So when you see that on a pattern, you actually put, and I'll show you, let's say this is my pattern I've cut out, and that's my fold. I would actually put it right on the fold, okay, and then I'd cut it out. Now the reason that is because when I go to, that's not really showing, is it? When I go to cut it, and I'll cut it all around, when I unpin it and then open it up, it'd create a bigger piece because it's been cut on the fold. Okay. And then you've got, they usually just put what the back is. These are these little triangles I was telling you about. You have to cut around those on your pattern. So it'll appear on your fabric as little triangles. Don't worry, you're not going to see them when you sew it together. It's just there to make sure you're matching pieces together, okay? That's all you really need to know as far as the symbols goes. Seam allowance. Seam allowance means, so when you've got your pattern, and you say you put it up against you, it's actually going to look bigger than what it is. And the reason that is because obviously when you sew something, it's sewn here and you're cutting it bigger, and obviously the bits with the frays go underneath, don't they? So the seam allowance is when you, and I'll show you on a sewing machine. So what I do as a trick is I put a little tape here. So when I go to sew, this pattern says sew 1.5 centimetres. So seam allowance 1.5 centimetres. So when I get my fabric, and let's say I've put it in there, I'll just put this down and then I'll grab it again. So let's say I've put that in here, that's a bit better. So I've put my fabric in, say this is my fabric, I'm going to put it in and I'm going to put the right at the edge of that, which is 1.5 centimetres. You see sometimes, I just put tape there so I know exactly where to go. There'll be little numbers, it's in inches, but 5/8 is 1.5 centimetres. So I just put a tape there so I know exactly where my seam allowance is. So you'd line your fabric up, put that down, and from the needle to here is 1.5 centimetres. That's your seam allowance. Amazing. Okay, next. Cool. So that's what you need to do. They've got things to figure out if you need to adjust or whatever. Now, over here, cutting. Before cutting, it always says press pattern pieces with a warm, dry iron. Definitely. So what you're going to do is once you've unfolded and you've cut out your pieces, iron them, because you'll get creases in here and you don't want it not the right shape before you put it on your fabric. Okay, it's really quite hardy, it won't burn, you just iron so they're nice and flat. Okay, it also says wash your fabric before you start sewing. You're meant to. I don't really, because it's too exciting. So, and then it takes too long and I just want to get sewing. So the reason they do that is because sometimes fabric can shrink. So if you've sewn it up, and I think this has happened to me, but I just got over it, is you've sewn it, you put it in the wash, guess what? It shrink. So it won't fit you anymore. So that's why you should wash it. Circle your cutting layout. So what that means is, just for future reference, just put a circle around the ones you want to do so you don't forget. Pin pattern to fabric is shown in the cutting layouts, which I explained to you. Cool. That's about it. Okay, so after cutting, this is what I'll show you later too. You've got to transfer the markings from the pattern onto the fabric, and you can do that by getting a chalk. So this is black, so I'd use a white chalk so I'd know particular bits of the pattern that I need to know, because once you unpin the pattern you won't remember anything that the pattern had said, so that's why you do that. So, and that's why it says you use pen and chalk or dressmaker's tracing paper and a wheel. I've got that. I don't like it. I prefer just chalk. Now you can see how I said here you can snip the triangles. You can do that if you forgot to cut out your triangles, but I just go off the triangles and you pin dots, pin mark dots. I'll go through that with you because it's kind of hard to explain and it's easier to show. Okay, so that's page 1. So that will show you all the detail. Now the way these work is you turn it over and they're all your directions. So we'll go into them next, but what I'm going to do is follow that initial stage. I'll do a quick video of that and then we'll get on to the next bits. How do I turn it off?